Hi, Megs. This is Meg's butt. She'll be right back. There she is.
Hello.
I think you should tell the people why you're making this face.
I have a
Tell them the whole story.
Well, I don't really know. I have a knee injury and it hurts really bad, and I'm gonna be fine. It
But
just
it
hurts.
really hurts, and so she's gonna try to.
So
not be
just don't
crazy.
mind me if I seem disengaged. I actually am, but it's not you.
It's not you. It's her. Well, I'm looking up the
Oh
the
yeah,
poll.
Okay, so today we're talking about. Well, before we start talking about that, we have to do announcements.
We do have some announcements. Shelly, because she's amazing, has posted the project management classes in the IX Ambassador group. So that has the link to get more information about project management class, which is a 2-day class. And by the way, if you're interested in that, you should sign the hell up because people are coming out of the woodwork to take that class. And then that's the 20th and 21st of May, so that's a Monday, Tuesday. And then Wednesday through Friday of that week, we're doing guiding organizational change, which is a lot of what we talk about, the kind of the same route that we talk about in part 2 of the book, the change transition model stuff. But in the class, it's really about how do you get people through change and still get work done on time and on budget. So it's a kind of a match of, it's a marrying of project management and actually getting things done in a very process-oriented way, in addition to like the human side of that. So human side of change and how you deal with change. So if you have any interest in that, Shelly put the classes on the, is that us talking? What's happening? Okay, Shelly's over there. So anyway, so the links should be in the event page. If you want more information on that, you should definitely come if you're interested though.
And I'm not I've managed projects, but I'm not a project manager. I'm not certified. I don't know nearly all the cool stuff Rachel does about it, but I have been in the guiding organizational change
class. You
class.
have attended that class.
And what I'll say for those of you who are thinking, oh, project management doesn't apply to me because I'm in HR or I'm in whatever, it does. And it's really pretty cool how what you learn in that class translates to all different frames of business. So if you are, just a reframe on the class, don't think of it in terms of project management. Think of it in terms of, boy, I have this new group of humans that I need to onboard, and I don't know really, I've not done it great in the past, or I've seen it done poorly in the past and I want to be better at it, or whatever. I don't know all the scenarios, but just because you're not a project manager or in accounting or in something where they use project management all the time does not mean you shouldn't be
pretty much everything.
Class.
Yeah, and there's that's a good point, because what really the power of project management is twofold, really. You have a understanding of the entire project, and then you also get to figure out how to make it better. It's like a super fun logic game. So if you nerd out about that stuff, it's really fun. But it takes a big thorny project and helps you figure out how to actually break it down into pieces that are manageable and how to actually get that done. So one example is I have a house that was, my dad would have burned to the ground. It's about a 120-year-old house. And like 20 people had wanted to start flipping it, but nobody could pull it off. And no one knew how to start. That's what everyone told me. I just wouldn't have known where to start. Well, when I saw it, I was like, oh, well, first of all, you put a doorknob on it because it had been kicked in. But yeah, I was able to take a look at that project, break it down, and figure out how much it would cost and all that stuff, and then decide if I wanted to take it on. So it's really applicable to anything from, around the house stuff to like actual big projects at companies. It's great fun.
What other announcements do we have? IXAF program group is starting June 3rd.
That's right, because the first is a Saturday.
If for anybody who is interested in knowing more about IX Ambassador Facilitator certification, please send a message to Rachel or I or Shelly, and we'll get you information. We'll set you up probably with a 20-minute call to talk about what your challenges are, how you want to use it, why you're interested in it, and really figure out what that process or how IXAF would benefit you and understand what your challenges are.
And frankly, to make sure that you're right for the program.
Yep. So that's coming up. What else? Rachel's going to be out of the country for the next 2 weeks?
About 2 work weeks. Yeah. So starting Monday. I'm going to be singing with the choir in Europe, so that will be fun. Also have a few work meetings, but mostly it'll be totally different world, so it'll be nice. And then I come back and do that full week of training. So by the last week of May, I will be insane. Anything else?
Nothing I can think of right now.
I would like to give a big congrats out to Michelle Stampy, who is the writer of our book. She has, since our book, she has been hired to write for a small publishing house out on the East Coast, I think Maine somewhere. And she's finishing her first book contract with them. And it's really incredible. The woman she's working for is amazing and doing great things, and we just can't be prouder.
Yeah. Good job, Michelle.
Yay!
High five. All right, then, on to it. Culture type mismatches. How do you get along with your teammates?
All right, so do you want to talk generally? Or
Sure.
how do you want to start?
Sure.
What's a great example of mismatch? Or maybe it's not even mismatch. Maybe it's just...
I don't know if mismatch is really the right word. It's just we don't understand each other. So Rachel had someone in a group that she participates in. This is Forbes when the woman said, well, what you're saying is we just don't know each other.
Oh, yeah.
So Rachel is in a group with her fellow Forbes contributors and was explaining what we do and whatever and how chaos and order tolerant types are different and self and team driven types are different, see the world differently. And this woman said, so you're telling me that we're just all different, but no one's ever actually taught us how to work together. We need each other. That's what she said.
Yeah.
We need each other.
Yeah.
Just no one's ever taught us how to work together and how to make things work. Which, that was kind of like a, yeah.
So pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I don't know if it's about mismatches. It's just that we don't know how to process information like other people process information. And so if we don't learn those preferences and environmental desires, then we just think those other people are crazy.
And yeah, it's interesting. I was actually in at the hot room in Spearfish where we live. It's a hot yoga studio. And I'm there for boot camp in the mornings, and there's a gentleman that teaches the class, and he'd probably laugh that I call him a gentleman. But anyway, he's a gentleman that teaches the class, and I was kind of just chatting with him, and he grew up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and he was talking about how he's moving on from Spearfish to, I think, Billings or Bozeman. I never remember. Anyway, one of those B names in Montana. And he said to me, his sister thinks he's crazy because his wife has already moved on to Billings and he's going to follow her after his semester. He's graduating from college. And they have 2 little kids and they're trying to do all this crazy navigating of things. And I said, and he said, oh yeah, my sister thinks she's crazy. She's always said, I want to get out of Cheyenne, but she's never done it. And I said, oh, well, you're just a chaos person and she's just an order person. Even intellectually, she might think it'd be fun to leave. She's intrinsically orderly, and so she probably thinks you're nuts, and you probably think she's nuts, right? And he's like, yeah, totally. I'm like, I know. It seems like it'd be an obvious thing. And he's like, yeah, no, it totally creates all kinds of stress, like between even family members. That one is like, I want to go off and do this thing. And I guess that a great example of that, too, is the Game of Thrones thing that you posted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. If you check it out, I think Bailey gave a great synopsis of the Game of Thrones culture types, the main characters' culture types. Hilarious. But when you go to movies, you start seeing these culture type, stressors, I guess, is, for lack of a better word, conflict. Like I always use Wreck-It Ralph too, for those of you who have kids and maybe have seen the movie. It's a really cute movie, but basically what it is, it's a stabilizer versus an independent perspective. So there's 2 friends. One wants to move away and do creative new things and adventurous things, and the other one wants her to stay with him and be his friend. And the whole movie is about how she wants to go and she feels bad about leaving because she knows he feels bad, but she wants to go anyway, and he's holding her back, and that's making resentment. And I mean, it's just such a perfect culture type analysis. It's incredible. It's really cool.
I think one of the So sort of the easier thing to address probably is it. So when we're working with clients and somebody says, oh my gosh, Johnny's an independent and I'm a stabilizer, no wonder we don't see the world the same way. Or they say, get along. We don't get along. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, you don't see the world the same way. So you can talk through that. That's pretty easy. The one that shows up where there's conflict and that doesn't seem like it would make as much intuitive sense as if there's two of the same culture types, or two chaos tolerant, or two team driven, but they're, fixer and stabilizer. So we like to think that, well, you and I are alike. So of course we see the world the same way and get along the same way.
You would hope so.
And that's true in terms of what your preferences are, but you might be, if there's two fixers, let's say, working in an organization, they might be working towards fixing different problems or for different reasons, or
on the same problem in a different way.
Yeah, same problem, different way.
Solution, yeah.
So sometimes, I'm trying to think of which organization I worked with. Oh, I know what it was. We went into this organization and had culture typed everyone, and I looked at all of it and I thought, okay, well, these fixer people probably see the world a lot the same way, and organizer, stabilizer, independence. But then when I actually talked to the people, I found out that the two of the fixers on the team didn't get along the most often. And I thought, oh, so it's one of those, they're probably working on the same projects together, finding different solutions, but then they both have similar and strong tendencies in the fixer world, so that they don't resolve that conflict as readily. So I think there's probably, we usually assume that, oh, well, you're like me, so we get along, but that's not necessarily true. Just because there's the culture types doesn't mean that people aren't fixing different problems or trying to find different solutions for the same problem that you're working on. So that can be true too. And a lot of times we get the question, well, wouldn't it be better if we were all stabilizers, or wouldn't it be better if we're all, and the answer is, well, obvious to us, I guess, but maybe not so obvious. No, we all need each other. But to add to that, people like, oh my God, we're all over the board, this must be bad. No, it's
okay too.
That's fine too. So
it does, one thing that I'll mention about the chaos people is that in a change environment, when there's changing going on, that the entire group is moving through, then probably the fixers are going to be more aligned as far as their tolerance for that chaos. And so that might actually be the time when they get along the best, because they're going to kind of join forces to figure out how to make it through this big change. Where I think I see a lot of fixers driving fixers crazy on the same team, or chaos people generally, is that when things are actually a little too stable, and then they chase around or they create chaos in some way to give them fulfill that need for chaos. And so but then the other person's like, why are you doing that? You're not fixing the problem, you're creating more problems. So it's almost like if you give them something to think about or do, it's almost like a better solution for the chaos people, because they want to feel that constant need for support and fixing and helping other people through something. So it's, I don't know if that's true across the board, but I have definitely seen that as a big challenge when fixers are in the same role for too long without enough sort of changing up of things.
Yeah. And on the other side of it, if you give people who are order tolerant too many changes all the time, they're likely going to short circuit and say, whatever. And then they become really probably combative and trying to create some order out of the chaos. But if two stabilizers or two order tolerant people are trying to create order in different ways, that can cause anxiety between the two different people. So,
or they just check out, and the other person's like, why are you checking out? And all the things.
Yeah.
It can get pretty squirrely. So that's why a lot of times understanding this, I mean, it's amazing the light bulb moments for people, just understanding where they are on that culture type graph. And really big changes, we have seen really big changes in teams just from that fact alone, understanding where it is, and that it's not personal, and that, oh, Susie just likes more order and that's why she drives me crazy. Because a lot of times you're with somebody or there's someone on your team and you're like, I don't even know why she drives me crazy, but she does. How she does things drives me crazy. And so just a lot of times that awareness is a huge revelation for people. I love it.
And I think so. We had a client meeting today, and they were talking about meeting with an individual. And I said, well, do we know the culture type of this person? Because there was like this whole, I don't know what he's going to say about that. I don't know what he's going to say about this. And he could say this. And it's important, actually, I think, to, especially around conversations that have to do with personnel. It's good to sort of what if enough to know what might shake out and think about the different possibilities. But you can, of course, get an analysis paralysis with, holy crap, what do we do with this person? And so the magic of culture types is that it's not just a one and done. Like, oh, well, okay, you're an organizer, great. And you think about that for the 32 seconds that you think about it, and then you don't ever use it again. And so we were having this conversation with a client today, and they were saying, well, we don't know what this person think about this or that, and blah, blah. And I said, well, what's their culture type? Oh, well, organizer. And I said, okay, well, you threw them quite a bit of chaos all at once, and so they, that freaked them out. So how can you support them in the way you communicate to them so that it doesn't seem so chaotic going forward? So the really cool thing is that once you know culture types and what other people's culture types are, you can modify your message to them a little bit so there isn't so many feelings of mismatch or dissension between culture types or the same culture types, because then you know what message appeals to those people.
Yeah, and in this case, the interesting thing about the chaos thing and making this person uncomfortable is that it was all well-intentioned, right? The idea behind the organizer getting sort of some chaotic things in their life was to see if she would step up and take on stuff, or if he would. The other side of it is to give him a broader depth of experience. So the people that were sort of assigning the task were really well-intentioned. They're like, hey, great, he needs to have more experience in a different way, and so we're going to give him a little different things to do. And they really thought that would be a really great growing experience for him. And that just, it turned out that felt chaotic to him. And so again, it's one of those, well, think about their culture type, and then you can support them in the way that actually will serve them, and then help them grow in the way that they need to, and they might know they need to, but in a way that won't feel so awkward or a poor match for their culture type. So
yeah, and I think in business, maybe particularly in the US, we have this tendency to think, well, throw them the ball, they'll either catch it with their teeth or they'll hit it with the bat, and they'll like sink or swim. And
right, throw them in the deep end.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of sink or swim.
Don't listen to that, Shelly. We're not really talking about you. Shelly's up there going, oh Jesus,
oh God. Well, that's why I've gotten 5 new tasks today.
Today, the last hour.
Yeah. And so sink or swim is good. I think that when you're dealing with people who are order tolerant, it's really smart to think about how that plays for them and what sort of sink or swim tactics can you use with those people that will actually serve them in their development, instead of just assuming that you throw a bunch of crap at somebody and then they're just going to sort it out.
Right,
because
exactly.
Order tolerant people, that is paralyzing. Mm-hmm. And so then we say, oh, well, Judy's not going to be good here because she can't do blah, blah thing. Well, Judy might not be suited for the role, or there might be some real functional issues there. What doesn't make that person not a good employee? It probably makes them not suited for a ton of chaos. And so, but there are ways that you could do sink or swim without making people crazy.
I think that's a really good, I think that's a really, really good point. That made me think of something else. I wonder if I can think of it. You're talking about the other thing that's super popular right now is get out of your comfort zone. It's the only way you can grow.
Be adaptable.
So here's the real story. It was great. Daryl Wilkin used a statistic when it was happening.
Here's the real story with Dr. Rachel.
That's right. That's right. The rest of the story. So Daryl Wilkin used a statistic the other day in a class that he was teaching for us, or not for us, he's teaching for himself, but he's teaching our stuff to other people. And he was saying that there's a resiliency leadership sort of philosophy. And one of the statistics they use is if you have somebody doing something that's not suited to them, a mismatch to their culture type, it actually decreases their productivity by 35%. And if you put somebody in an ideally suited role that's ideally suited to their culture type, well, we use culture type, they use something else, then you can actually get an increased productivity of 35% or thereabouts. So in the end, if you take someone from a role that they're mismatched in to one that they're ideally suited for, you can get 70% more productivity and more, and frankly, happier people. So I just think that this idea that push out of the comfort zone and that's how we grow. Yeah, but that's really a chaos person message, because trust me, really or truly order tolerant people want nothing to do with that. And it doesn't serve them to have that thought process for all of your people. So it's just really important to realize what advice works for chaos people and what advice works for order people. I mean, it's just such a huge, I look at through LinkedIn and like every article I could say, okay, well, that would be a disaster for chaos people. Like one of the things that we see a lot is you have to be more adaptable. You have to be more collaborative. Well, guess what? Chaos people already do that. So to do that more means that we'll probably get less shit done. And then I'll see the next thing about you should focus more is the next headline. Well, that for order people, they're already focused. If they focus more, they'd probably sacrifice any kind of, chaos that they might be able to achieve in their role. So, you have to be really aware of who you have on your team and what's going to actually work for them. And because if you do the opposite thing, it can really destroy your team and your staff, frankly. So anyway. Okay, I have the list here. That's why I got my phone out.
Let's do the list. Hey, okay. Shelly, will you write down the thing that Rachel just said about that statistic? You weren't doing something. You were working very hard on something else. But I want to tell you about this later. So just write down 70% statistic, and that will we'll remember.
Remember, yeah. And we should probably ask Daryl where he got it, because he would have this citation.
It's resiliency leadership something.
Yeah.
Because he talked to me about that a little bit when I did that leadership class.
Yeah. Okay, so the third ranking, let's see, and this probably depends on how many of you are looking for work, but we'll do it as a short, light treatment of this question. What are some questions I can ask during an interview to find out if I'm going to be a culture type mismatch of the position? It's a good one, because I give a lot of advice to people hiring. And the advice I give to them is, what kind of role do you have? Is it going to be kind of the same thing every day? Is it going to be embedded in a team or on its own? Like, there's some real basic things that kind of go right to our culture type assessment that if you just ask a couple questions, like, well, do you really like a lot of chaos in what's going on? Or would you rather kind of know what you're going to do every day? Like, very simple. You can really get pretty simple with this stuff.
Yeah. So one question to ask if you're looking at a position would be, well, one that's probably pretty applicable today in today's world is what's the flexibility of the schedule? So organizations, or within even an organization and then a department of an organization, sometimes there's more flexibility based on the kind of work it is, or more flexibility based on the kind of department it is or kind of organization it is. So that's a good indicator of whether or not that is chaos or order tolerant. And I will tell you that that tendency within an organization really does follow the sort of heartbeat of the company. I've been in on lots of conversations where, executive teams are debating whether or not they should allow more flexibility in schedules or not, and follow more traditional. And it usually the answer to that question usually follows along with the sort of attitude, heartbeat of the organization in terms of whether or not they're order tolerant or chaos tolerant. And so, yeah, if you've got quite a bit of flexibility built into the organization, they're going to say, oh yeah, we offer lots of options, lots of work from home options. Of course, there are some departments that can't do that. But we just try and offer as much as we can. Those organizations are probably going to be more chaos tolerant.
As an organization, it doesn't mean the role is. So you have to kind of think about that too. It might be that you're going to be customer service rep for a chaos tolerant company, and that might mean you have to be at your desk from 8 to 5 every day. It's going to be the same thing all the time. So yeah, be sure you're thinking about both the role and the company as a whole. All right. I think I'm mismatched with my boss or manager. What should I do?
Quit.
Run screaming.
Run screaming. I'm going to just, if you'll just excuse me, I just have to put this up. Okay. So I'm going to be.
She's going to be leaning back.
Yeah, you can't tell that I have my foot up, but I do. And so I'm not disengaging, I promise.
It's on the other side. There's all kinds of, I got all kinds of hair over here. It's just really not a good scene.
Glad you can't see my foot.
Those are really cute socks, though, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. I like them. I got them at Shields. They're really comfortable.
They're super cute. Okay, so mismatch with boss or manager. So this is a constant frustration for people. Personal experience. The tricky part about a boss or manager is that they have the authority to affect your life in a very real way. So I'm not sure the culture type necessarily for me. A lot of times for me, a direct supervisor is really more about, do they value my contribution? So even if they're chaos tolerant and I'm an order tolerant person, do they value the fact that I'm providing them something that is of value to the company? Because you always hear that the number one reason people leave a company is because of their immediate supervisor. And so I think a big challenge with that is that people don't feel valued. So the culture type mismatch might come up that you might have a super chaos boss and you're a super order person. But honestly, if they value what you bring to the table, it doesn't really matter if that's a mismatch or you're exactly the same. It can be annoying because they'll ask you to do things that you're uncomfortable with. And so be aware that for you order people, that people, other bosses that are chaotic, they expect you to ask questions. So it's one of the big things that we see is that a lot of order people feel like asking for clarification or saying, you know what, hey, crazy boss, you want me to do this new thing, but I don't know when you want to do, who you want involved, how much money do I have? Or do you expect me to do it right now or should I do it next week? Like all of those kind of questions. A lot of times order people are reluctant to address those issues because they feel like that's somehow, creating a conflict. Let me assure you that the chaos people in the room want you to ask those questions. So a lot of times that's the biggest mismatch challenge that we see is that a lot of times the order people don't know how to plug into the chaos of their bosses. But don't be afraid of that. That's a really great way to, that's one of the great reasons to know culture types is because then you can see, okay, well, it's not that he just is trying to drive me crazy because he is or she is. It's because they're chaotic and I'm not. So what can I do to try to translate their chaos into something that I can relate to, take care of, execute on, or whatever? So I'd say that was for sure a thing that we've seen a lot about that boss and a staff person mismatch.
Yeah, and I would say because I just want to preface this with it hurts my soul a little bit to say this out loud because I personally don't buy into this. Well, I buy into it. I'm just not good at it. Anyway.
I can't wait to hear what this is.
If in fact you don't have the authority to sit down with someone who's your boss and say, hey, listen, Rachel, you and I are really not on the same page, and I want to understand more about why that is. So a lot of people are, I think, nervous or anxious about having that conversation because they don't feel like they have the perceived authority to do so, which I could do an entire another live by myself about why that's
that would mostly be ranting, but anyway,
yeah,
it's something.
So I'll just spare you that. But what I would say in that situation where you don't have that perceived authority is really focus your attention on the matter of business at hand. Mm-hmm. And so then it's not about, Rachel doesn't like me or I don't like her if she's my boss. It's about what do we have to get done? Mm-hmm. And how do we create business goals around the thing that has to get done? Now, if the two of you actually don't get along and you don't ever try and do anything to resolve those issues, that will still be under there. But
at least you can talk about the work.
You can at least then talk about the work. And so in situations where you think, gee, mostly I just want out of here at some point, fine. But today you have to do your job. And so if you have to do your job, take all those emotions and feelings, scream them into a little imaginary pillow in your office, write them down on a piece of paper, stick it in your drawer, and then say, what is my goal for talking to this person? And so I think it's really important to just keep it to business. And Rachel talks about in project management, a lot of times the excuse is, well, not the excuse, but people say, well, we have to get everything done. And so in the class, Rachel will say, well, what do you have to get done first? Well, no, my boss always says everything's done first.
Everything's a number one priority.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so if you go in and your supervisor says to you, well, everything is priority one, you have to figure it out. Then you sit down with them and say, okay, well, if I focus my attention on project A right now for the next 10 hours in 2 days, that means the deadline for project B will fall off into next week. Are you okay with that? And so it makes them commit to not making your life crazy, essentially, is the goal.
It's a gift that you give yourself and everyone, really, because a lot of times your supervisor doesn't really know what it takes to pull shit off. Shelly's learning this herself. So that's the thing, is that if they say, well, everything's first priority. Well, great. I totally agree with that. However, I can't physically do more than one thing at a time. So this is how I have it racked right now. Like, let's say you have 7 things to do. This is how I have them prioritized. Is that how you want me to work on them? And he'll say, or she'll say, oh no, number 6 should be a number 2. I don't want this other thing done before that's done. But a lot of times I don't know. And so you're giving them a gift by making sure that they get done what they need. And you're giving yourself a gift by not driving yourself crazy. So I think that's I can't emphasize enough what a important thing that is for you to do. Let's see, the last question. This is 2:32. My phone says 2:02. Oh, I took a picture. I'm like, why does my phone say it's 2:02? It's because I took a screenshot of my phone anyway. Okay.
Hashtag smart people are stupid sometimes.
Right?
It happens.
Hashtag winning. Okay. What are some tools each culture type can use to get along with their opposite culture type? So stabilizers, independents, fixers, organizers.
Well, I would say understand their preferences and do some real mindset work around putting that first in your brain when you're
right.
You know, I mean, after a while you kind of get the hang of it when you're practicing it. But if there's someone that you really struggle with, then really focus on how can you communicate with that person so that they understand you, because your inability to communicate with that person is not about you. It's about them and what they're hearing. It's not about what you want. It's about what they're hearing. Until you can get to common ground and have good conversations with less conflict and more healthy debate. It's not about what you think or what you want them to hear. It's about what they're hearing. And so I think if you would sort of let go of that urge to put your own
take your ego out of it.
Yeah, take your ego out of it. That's a good way to put it.
Well, and that's really the thing. Because frankly, if you know, and the other part of it is to try to, it's hard to fix one end of a two-ended thing, right? So if you're trying to fix something and they have no clue or don't care, it's really hard to make that work. And so whether it's educating them a little bit about by you asking them questions. So if they're not getting, if the other person's not getting that you need more scheduling information, then you need to ask them, because you know that'll benefit them in the long run, benefit you. They don't mean to be a jerk about not knowing, or that they just figure you'll figure it out. And frankly, you can help each other. The other side of it is, if you're a chaos person and they're orderly and they're demanding that you be orderly before they can really process things, you know, sometimes you just have to do the things that make you a little bit uncomfortable for the benefit of the project. I was working with one woman who's very order tolerant. She was driving me freaking crazy because she wanted to size the program for 10,000 people when we didn't even have one yet. So we're going to sell 10,000 widgets. We haven't even sold one widget yet, but she wants to create the systems that can support 10,000 widgets. And I'm like, that's over engineering, way more money, blah, 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 all the things. But what she was really telling me is that she felt overwhelmed by this and she didn't really understand how it was going to work. And so I literally, actually Meg was on this conversation and she was like, I don't know how you put up with her. But at the end of the day, I knew that if I didn't work with her, even though it was painful for me, if I didn't spend an hour with her figuring this out, then she would have totally shut down. We wouldn't have got anything done. And then I would pay for that later on, right? So it can be painful to
acknowledge and deal with someone else that is totally different than you. But if you have in mind sort of that ego thing, if you put your needs aside and you say, okay, for the good of this project, I've got to get this done, then she needs either more time or, hey, I'll send you a list or a plan, or let's build a plan together. Like, she needs that understanding or she's not going to work and work very well. And it's not because she's being a jerk. She honestly doesn't know how to do it in a way that's productive. But one thing I would say the question has is, what are some tools? So we can actually, Meg has a great tool that she does in her training classes that I think you should mention.
The experience cube.
Whatever the hell
I knew
called.
it was that because you couldn't remember.
I never the name. Although I think that we'll edit it a little bit to add culture types in there. Maybe, I don't know if it's 4 different ones, or just add a little box on the end or something. But you should tell them a little bit about what that is.
Yeah.
Some of you have heard it already, but some of you
I think it's
new.
in the files, actually.
Have you already uploaded it?
I think so. So the experience cube is, well, let me start here. For all of the years of all of the years of business time, we've been told, oh, well, you just put those tears back in your eyes, those emotions back in your heart where they belong.
This is
business. It
business.
doesn't belong in business.
It's not personal.
And the reality is we're all humans, and that's not possible. And so everyone, men and women and whoever, everybody in the world struggles with this. Well, I'm not supposed to feel emotional. And that's just silly.
It's on page 194, by the way.
On page 194, for those of you who are following along with the book. So the experience cube actually helps you compartmentalize the different parts of an experience or situation, conversation, particularly one that's sort of conflict ridden, or if it's just a new project, you're not really sure how to approach it, so that you have an opportunity to make good business decisions based on common sense and logic, as opposed to...
But without denying the feelings part. I think that's important.
Well, that's what I'm going to say next.
Oh, sorry.
Without letting the emotions and everything run it, but giving them their own space. And so what happens a lot of times is your assumptions and your feelings and emotions and all that sort of take over everything, and you don't really make decisions based in logic, you make decisions based in emotion. That happens because we don't pay any attention to them, because they're supposed to not. It's like, oh, nope, they're over there. But they keep creeping out, and then they take over. I always imagine when I talk about this, isn't it Mucinex commercials?
With the boogers?
With the boogers, the
mucus?
little booger people.
The little mucus people?
And they just like keep cropping up until you take Mucinex, and then
knock them out.
It knocks them out. So
we're not endorsing any products.
Yeah, we are not sponsored by or endorsing any products.
Although if you know any Mucinex people, you can have them call us.
Yeah. But so in the experience cube, you compartmentalize observations, what's really happening, thoughts, what do you really think, or assumptions, feelings, how does it make you feel, what are the actual things that make you feel
nuts,
and
usually
then what are the wants, like what's the actual goals. A lot of times if we're in a new situation or something that has conflict in it, we have maybe this grandiose idea of what a solution would be, but we don't really know anything about how to get there, or what are some goals to put in place to get that to happen. So first you figure out what your observations really are, and then you talk with yourself or the group or whatever about what your thoughts and feelings are, and really own those and say, you know what, the feeling that I have associated with this event is I'm frustrated, angry, or I'm anxious, or I'm so excited I don't even know where to start. Because if you give those space and you say it out loud to yourself or other people, then that's it. It's done. It's no longer possessing everything about the situation. And then you put down your wants, or what your goals are, what do you want to have happen, and then use that as a baseline for how you're going to handle the situation going forward. So that's an important tool you can use to understand and work through a business issue, no matter what the culture types are.
Yeah, one example about not knowing what you want thing. I mean, that seems like, to me, it seems like, well, of course you know what you want. But like, if you think about, what if you go to a steakhouse and they bring you and vegetarians, just hang in here with the analogy. So, okay, so let's say you go to a steakhouse and the steak isn't how you liked it. And so you're pissed about it. You're upset. You like your steak a certain way. If you send it back, it's going to take long. You're going to order another one. Like, so, and the cool thing is everyone comes out with a different answer. That's why this tool is so great, because it really suits you and it suits the situation. So I look at it and I'm like, well, my steak came out not like I ordered it. What do I feel about that? I really don't care. Whatever. I'm really super easy. I grew up with well done meat, and my boyfriend eats rare, and so I can do anything. I don't really care. Now, some other people sitting next to me might say, well, my steak's not done the way I wanted it. Let's say it's done well and I asked it for medium. Well, to a lot of people, that means you ruined their meal. And so would you send it back? Some people would say yes. But at the end of the day, what do you want? Do you want a free meal? Do you want a new steak? Like, are you going to eat it, but you're pissed because they did it wrong? So it's really interesting when you start really digging into what do you want? Like, what's going to solve this problem for you? Maybe nothing. Maybe you should get up and leave. I don't know. But there's no right answer. It's really figuring out how you can react to a situation and actually solve the problem, or get you sort of deal with the feelings and then figure out strategically or logically how to actually achieve the thing you're trying to achieve. And then, of course, if you're dealing with another human, you could say, well, I want to achieve that one of my team members has an additional skill set that nobody in our team has. We need to train somebody up on this thing. Well, then I might say, okay, well, who are on my team? Who is best suited? Who is order tolerant? What kind of training is it? Is it more for a chaotic person, more for an order person? Like, then you can really, that's sort of how you get it done, right? It's like, what's your action? And if you're actioning with another human, that can really give you a lot of insight into how to solve that challenge.
Yeah, the experience cube, I've seen it work really well. People sort of find it to be really gold when they're dealing with conflict in other people. Mm-hmm. And so if you have an employee, if you're a leader or a supervisor and you have an employee who, whatever, isn't meshing with the team, isn't showing up for work, whatever it is. And I always say first, actually, what do you want to have happen with this person? And a lot of times people are like, I just don't, take some time, a few minutes and pushing and sort of nagging on my end to say, well, what do you really want? What do you really want?
She's great at that.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, they're like, I just wish they would leave, or I just wish she would do this part of the job, or I wish she would get along with this person. And so once you identify that, because until you identify that, you're just frustrated. So once you identify what that want is, and you're like, oh, okay, well, then we can go back to observations and thoughts and say, well, what's really happening? Or why isn't she doing this part of the job? Or why do you want her to leave? Or why is she not getting along with that person? And so sometimes, we talk about it in the order that it exists in the tool, observations, thoughts, feeling, wants, but sometimes you have to actually identify that want first. Mm-hmm. What do you want to have happen? And I love Rachel's steak example. Or food example, because that is one everyone can identify with. It's like, well, what do you really want? Do you want another meal? You just going to eat it? Or you going to walk out of there mad? And who gives a shit if you're mad?
And you don't tell anybody.
Then you get to do that because that's what you want to have happen. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think the magic about the experience cube too, and knowing what you want, is it sort of gives you permission to want what you want, because there's a lot of social norms in business and just in the world in general where it's like, well, you're not supposed to want somebody to leave your business, or you're not supposed to want to walk out and just be pissed for a little while and get over it. But it gives you permission to do that. Well, if that's what you want, then how do you get there? And then you move on. And so I think it really, I think it's a very magic tool.
It is pretty magic. Another thing too that a lot of times this stuff is for, and this idea of the conflict is conflict resolution is really hard. I mean, that's like one of the number one things we see that people want outside consultants for training, keynote speaking, like all of that is like a hugely high need skill still. And another thing that we've included in some of our training is I put together like a conflict resolution kind of worksheet where it kind of says, okay, what do you know about this? What don't you know? Who's been involved? It kind of lays out in that way, like gives you the sort of the context of what this is, and frankly an awareness of, well, maybe I don't actually know the whole story, because I've only talked to Bob, and I know there were 7 people involved, and so maybe Susie has a different version. And so I actually lay it out there. So, and it also helps you document if you're in a leadership role or trying to deal with some big conflict. It also helps you document what you know and what you don't know and how to chase that. And frankly, if you need to put it in a file and bring it out in 6 months, you have it documented. And then so it says, what's the next steps? So it's not just what you want. It takes kind of the next level. It says, okay, well, I want these 2 to just freaking get along. And then it's like, okay, well, what's the next step then? Is it, hey, we're going to get them all in a room and we're going to have a meeting and then we're going to lay out expectations, or are we going to fire somebody, or maybe they just need a little training, or whatever that might be. So it's kind of nice. So it gives you kind of a recipe to follow. And then you can just go to the next question instead of going, oh my gosh, someone's going to yell at me and they're going to be so mad. And, okay, well, I'm just getting information, right? So it kind of gives you a template for how to put that, how to organize your thoughts a little bit. So again, helps you put those feelings to say, man, this really pisses me off. But you can put them aside and sort of scream in your imaginary pillow and then carry on with some of the details. So I think those things together work really well.
Yeah. One last tip, I suppose we're about out of time, but one last tip I would share about, this is just generally a good idea, regardless of your culture type, a good idea for everyone, but especially if you're struggling, if it feels like you're struggling to communicate effectively to a particular culture type or a particular person, but you know that so this happens when you might send an email and it says A, B, C, and D, and then you sit down in a meeting with a person and you say the same things and they're like, what? Why would you say that? Or why would they? And you're like, I literally just put that in an email and you were fine with it. So I'm sure you've all heard this conversation like, well, Bob, I just put that in the email. I don't know why now there's a problem with it. Have you changed your mind? Do you have some new information I don't know about?
This doesn't happen, by the way, I should make.
So what's usually probably happening is that something about the tone of your voice or your body language is throwing off what they're receiving from you as far as what the message is in person. And so one thing I've done to because I'm very, if you haven't noticed, my body language is eccentric. And this is not just because we're on live, this is literally how I am all the time.
You have to give her some space.
And so I'm really overwhelming to some people, like really off-putting, actually. And so what I've done is have people, not to Rachel. So what I've done is have colleagues of mine in the past and say, hey, listen, I know there's a certain topic coming up that, there's been some debate on, and I would love to have your feedback about my body language and my intonation when I'm talking. Do I sound condescending? Am I too intense? Do I sit back like this when the other person is talking that I don't agree with? So it gives you some insight. It's usually best if it's someone who can be objective. We don't always have that opportunity. But it really gives you some insight into what about how you're communicating turns off the other person. So anyway, get some feedback on what you actually look like when you talk to people. It will really, what do you call that? It's a favor to yourself.
Oh,
however you say that. You're doing yourself a favor.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reverse can be true. We're going to have a guest walk in the door here in a second. Hi, come on in. The reverse can be true, where in person you're having this conversation and what's happening?
Okay, Cappy is in here, and he got us, it's fine. You can just make a little noise, it's fine. Because when we're on air, he never knows. So he bought a sign that says on air, and
it's right in the window,
supposed to have it up,
actually.
But it's not up. So he's going, where's the sign?
Yeah, we didn't put it out. I actually thought of that. I know.
Yeah.
It's timing. It's time. He's reminding us the time. Anyway, what the hell are we talking about?
I don't know.
Oh, email. So a lot of times you're talking to a person and they seem like they're totally fine with the idea, and then you email them and the opposite happens. And they're like, oh, what is this? I can be a little to the point on emails. Which
let's just say Rachel has resting bitch face on accident in her emails, not in person.
She has resting bitch face in person. Yeah, I do it in emails. Yeah. So for her, so if I was gonna say to her, well, I can do it on the phone too. The other day I did it on the phone. I can do it out loud too.
I think it's a yeah. Lenny, go on.
Yeah, it's something I'm working on. But for me, it's like a lot. If I'm in like get things done mode, I can just say, no, that's not right. Do it this other way. And I don't mean to say I don't respect you or agree with you or whatever. I just I don't understand, or just go do it. What's the big deal? And so that suits me, but it doesn't suit the person I'm communicating with. So, and a lot of times in email, that would sound like I'm being a total ass. And then in person, I seem a little bit of an ass, but in email, it's like super bad. So again, it's that sort of look at sort of reflection in the mirror a little bit about how you're communicating in any situation. And then if you have that culture type stress, that just adds to it. So,
yeah.
All right.
Man, I feel like this is a good one.
This was a good one.
You should encourage all your IX or IX Ambassador closed group friends to listen to this one.
Yeah, and invite your other friends to join. Because we're in kind of a phase where we're inviting anybody that comes to the group. Sometimes we charge for we haven't. So at some point, we'll be charging for groups as we get through the IXAF, but this will be a free group, even though it's closed. So invite your friends.
We should have a challenge.
We should.
We have 175-ish people
180,
right now.
I think, now.
Yeah.
Oh. See who can get the most. Shelly will get the most because she has been a monster.
Shelly doesn't count now. No.
That's not true. It's not true. Don't you believe it for a second.
It is true when it comes to IX Ambassador events. Okay, so
Only
what do you get? Let's do it. What do you get? If you invite the most people who actually come to the group.
How about we send them a compass? Is that too nerdy?
No,
one of our engraved
who cares
compasses.
What they think?
Are you raising your hand? Or are you just stretching? Okay, so we have these really awesome brass, legit compasses that we have our logo engraved on, and they are badass looking even for non-map nerds.
We should probably tell them but for those who aren't map nerds, tell them what Rose
compass
group is about.
Rose group. So we should go grab one right there.
What is?
The compasses. So the Rose Group International, Rose is actually a compass rose, and I don't have any of my business cards here. Do you have any of your business? Well, here's so here's a compass. It actually has the Road Not Taken by Robert Frost inscribed on one side, and then it has our logo on the other side. And then I don't know if I can open this without breaking it out, but I'll do a shot. And then show mirror. So that's our logo, and the whole idea is yeah. So the whole idea is compass rose is the thing on maps that shows north, south, east, west. In case you don't know what a compass rose is, or I think I got it open, but it's kind of a high quality piece of thing. So anyway, so here's the inside of the compass. It's actually a functioning compass. I have it locked now. So that's the compass rose on the inside. And so anyway, so we'll send one of those to you.
Yes, and the reason that we named our company the Rose Group after the Compass Rose is because we help people in business find their way.
Find your way.
So
isn't it a great pun? This is an homage to our pun fans and to our map nerds. It's like the perfect. My mom was like gushing about how smart our logo is and our company name and how much she loves it. So thanks, Mom. Our mom says it's awesome.
Okay,
we gotta go.
We have to have a deadline for the challenge.
Some week by next live.
By next live. You're not going to be here for it though.
That's true.
Sad.
I will be sleeping.
Let's go end of May.
No, it's too long. Way too long. I say a week and then maybe another one at the end of May for the month cumulative. How's that?
So in 1 week.
1 week, the most invites that you have to bring gets a compass, and maybe the month in total. Then we have 2.
Ooh, it's a twofer.
Oh.
Not like that. Okay, I guess we're done talking.
Time to go. All right, so.
We didn't change it. Lead powerfully.
Change the world. Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you next week. Well, Meg will.